Think of a container vessel. Now multiply it by 100. That's an ultra-large container vessel. 11 billion tons. That's the amount of cargo transported across ships all over the world every year. From transporting everyday essentials to large equipment, businesses have always preferred sea freight over air freight. In fact, trade by sea is one of the greatest relics of humankind. It's been happening since the time we discovered some objects could float. They can be best described as the mammoths of cargo shipping. An ultra-large container vessel can carry a minimum of 14,000 TEUs, or ton equivalent units. Most go up to 20,000 and are over 1,400 feet long and 200 feet wide. It'd make more sense to compare them to the average container vessel, which can carry 2 TEUs. They're bigger and better, and as the biggest consumer market in the world, you'd think that all of them would be headed directly for the United States, right? Well, that's where you'd be wrong. Why are there no ultra-large shipping vessels headed for the US? This is where we'll have to pivot and talk about the United States shipping routes. As one of the world's largest traders, the US sees a massive number of container ships entering and leaving the country's 9 largest ports. In 2021, MarketWatch determined that the numbers rose by 16%, with a record 50.5 million handling. The US is surrounded by 2 oceans: the Atlantic Ocean, which serves as a shipping route between North America and Europe, and the Pacific Ocean, which serves as a route between North and South America. It's important to understand that every country surrounded by a body of water has established a port, and the US, with 9 of the largest ports in the world, is no different. What's odd, however, is the fact that despite all this, there are no ultra-large container vessels that are traveling to and from the United States. The UCL Energy Institute released an interactive sea freight map that shows how cargo ships travel across the open waters in real time. They actually went a step ahead with features that'd show you shipping containers that meet specific requirements. It'd show you shipping containers following specific patterns, their routes, and of course, their sizes. Without getting into specifics, let's first look at the number of ships that are traveling across the globe. What does that first look show you? There are ships traveling across the periphery of every continent. In fact, you can trace the outlines of the continents just by looking at the shipping routes alone. You'll also notice a few thick lines on the map, and these obviously show the most frequented shipping routes. The thickest of them all would be between the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, the English Channel. This channel connects the United Kingdom with the rest of Europe. It sees the most traffic of any other shipping route, with about 45,774 crossings in 2022. You'll also notice a thick band in Asia, right around Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. That's the Malacca Strait, traveling from Asia to Europe. What else can you see? There are thick bands coming and going from the US, with the thickest along the Panama Canal. From this interactive map, you'll also notice that some areas are only faintly outlined. Most of these would be around the Middle East and parts of Africa. The Horn of Africa, for example, despite being an ideal shipping route, all things considered, sees considerably less traffic than it's supposed to. That's attributed to the rising number of Somalian pirate ships that have attacked and sunk cargo ships over the years. The other part is the Middle East, and you'll notice that despite being the world's oldest and most coveted trading route, the Red Sea, there's not as much traffic as one would expect. Believe it or not, this ties in with why the United States has no ultra-large container vessels. If you refine the search and look for only shipping containers that carry more than 16,000 TEUs, that's the ultra-large container vessels we're talking about, you'll notice that there really is one rather long curved line. The line travels across East Asia, through the Malacca Strait, and chokes around Sri Lanka. That's because the Sri Lankan port of Colombo is one of the world's oldest and largest ports. It sees an influx of ships coming from parts of Asia and then traveling further west. Here's something that probably caught your eye. Instead of going through the Red Sea as you'd expect, the ships then take a lengthy detour across South Africa, and then eventually choke again at Algeciras, Spain, again, one of the world's largest and oldest ports. 2 routes emerge from here. The first travels from Algeciras into the Mediterranean, heading eastward. The other route travels straight north into other parts of Europe. Through it all, you can see that ultra-large shipping containers steer away from North America. Liner Letisa released a table that broke down the average shipping sizes that travel from Asia to Europe even further. There are three major shipping alliances that travel on that route: 2M, Ocean Alliance, and the Alliance. The average size of the shipping vessels is significantly larger than the average size of cargo vessels anywhere else. What's the significance of carrying large vessels from Asia to Europe? And why aren't they traveling to the United States? These questions are bound to come up, and there are some pretty straightforward responses. For one, Asian shipping containers traveling to Europe or vice versa are larger to meet consumer needs. Again, shipping freight is significantly cheaper than air freight, and as often is the case, they can carry more load. Now, ultra-large shipping vessels make sea freight even easier and more cost-effective. This isn't to say that it's cheap, however, and that brings us to the second question. Why not trade with the United States? It's not that Asian shipping vessels don't want to trade with the U.S. Let's face it, the U.S., as one of the most populous countries in the world, makes up one of the largest consumer bases there is. There has to be another reason why ultra-large vessels take detours and avoid North America. Again, sea freight is cheaper, but not dirt cheap. With the Houthis uprising in Yemen, ships have been taking longer routes across South Africa and away from the Red Sea. Besides causing massive shipment delays, the longer route also means that shipping companies have to pay more for fuel. To offset that cost, they then decide to focus on one consumer market, the closest one they have. That would be the European market. Now, before we talk about how the Houthi uprising has affected shipping between Asia and the United States, we have to look at why the U.S. hasn't decided to send its own ultra-large shipping vessels from any of its major ports into Asia. Again, that's because of cost-effectiveness. Some estimates suggest that it could take approximately $130,000 per day, inclusive of fuel costs, to operate a shipping vessel. Take the Panama Canal as an example. It's one of the world's shortest shipping routes, but estimates suggest that it costs shipping companies $9 million per year to operate to and from. 46% of this cost has been attributed to fuel. With rising costs, overcapacity, and freight rates, shipping companies have been looking to minimize costs as much as possible. One way to do it would be to use ultra-large container vessels, which the U.S. does not. Simply put, they don't need to. That's because shipping routes across the Atlantic Ocean form direct links between Europe and North America. Now, North American countries such as the US and Canada are dealing with European merchants who might in turn be selling them Asian goods. Yes, those would be the goods they procured from the ultra-large shipping vessels. Just because they don't need to doesn't mean they should. After making their way into Europe, the consumer market makes use of the Asian goods first. It's important to remember that Asian goods are famously cheaper than what would otherwise be their equivalents in the West. After the European market makes do with what it received, it opens up its markets to North American markets. Only this time, they elevate the cost. This upcharge could be because of several reasons: a more expensive market, freight charges of their own, and so on. The biggest deterrent here is the Houthis, and that's coming from the United States Department of Justice. Also known as Ansar Allah, the Houthis, a rebel group based in Yemen. They emerged in the early 2000s, and since then have been involved in several armed conflicts with the Yemeni. The Houthis have had a significant impact on trade in the Red Sea region, particularly through their control of key maritime choke points and their involvement in the Yemeni civil war. One major aspect is their control of strategic locations. The Houthis hold sway over important maritime routes and ports along the Red Sea coastline, including the port city of Hodeidah. Their involvement in the conflict has resulted in an increased risk of maritime attacks and piracy along the Red Sea coast. The Houthis have been accused of targeting commercial vessels passing through the region. These actions have contributed to heightened tensions and instability, impacting trade and commerce. Additionally, the Houthis have imposed blockades and restrictions on maritime traffic as part of their conflict tactics. In recent developments, Yemen's Houthi rebels have intensified their attacks on vessels linked to the United States. In February, the Houthis attacked a maritime shipping vessel traveling from the U.S. containing several tons of fertilizer. Previously, they'd attacked ships that were transporting aid to support the Yemeni humanitarian crisis. In response to the attacks, the U.S. Department of Justice released a statement claiming that because of the attacks on civilian ships, they would be imposing sanctions on the region. For the DOJ, this meant seizing all aid transportation into Yemen, Sudan, and Ethiopia. However, for the Houthis, this meant a blockade of ships traveling to or from the U.S. This isn't to say that the Red Sea is completely safe. No, the Houthis have made it a point to attack indiscriminately. What's interesting, however, is because of the military group's clear agenda against the US and several of its allies, including Israel, they're keener on attacking ships that bear a red, white, and blue banner. So, the Red Sea is out of the question, but is there a way around this for US shipping companies? Yes and no. One argument can be made that the shipping vessels that are taking the longer route from South Africa could just as easily travel in a straight tangent into New York. However, there's a problem there. Why would an extra-large shipping vessel focus on one port? That, plus the fact that the Newark port, in its current state, isn't well developed to receive ultra-large shipping vessels. It would already take the vessels an added week in an already expensive course to port in Newark and then travel eastward into Europe. But what if the vessels took a more direct route through the Pacific? This could make sense for several reasons. The shipping route is almost entirely straight. However, the problem again is twofold. U.S. ports are not well equipped to handle ultra-large shipping vessels, and shipping companies want more profit. They won't just focus their resources on one port. Will the U.S. ever be able to find a workaround? Thanks for watching. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and while you're here, check out some of our other videos.